order planning board meeting for July 15th, 6 o'clock. Can we take the roll? Here.
Here. Here. Still here. Still here.
All right. Tonight's meeting is going to be focused on the sewer treatment plant, the report for that. Anything you want to go over before we start that?
No. How about this?
Right. Yeah, we do. And are we going to approve minutes or are we going to wait later on? All right. Hello. All right. So the way this is going to be is a conversation. It's going to be very informal, and it's going to be educational. I already talked to the town engineer about this. We really want people at home and people within the community as a whole to understand what our infrastructure system is about. There is a lot of rumors out there about it, or even urban legends that we have like 3 plants and we own them all, and capacity out the yin-yang and all of that. And I think it's important for people to understand what this is about, what the system is about, and where we're going. And so I'm going to invite you guys up. It is really your floor. We're not in a rush. Again, we talked a little earlier, and as I said, I wanted this to be an educational session for everybody. So I will, even though I have an engineering background, if I ask questions, they're going to be questions that I hope or assume maybe that people at home would want to know. So if I start asking you questions and it seems pretty basic, it's intended to be pretty basic. Okay. So you want to start? Introduce yourself, please.
Yes.
Is the red light on?
The light's on. Is it working? Yeah, there we go. I'm John Gerhard, the town engineer. I've met the planning board before. The public may or may not have seen me online viewing. And we have our consultants from Wright Pierce here, Andrew Smith and Ryan Bargnarek. And just a little preliminary, this is a, the waste facilities plan update is a 20-year planning effort for all of the town's wastewater facilities. It's a project we started a year and a half, 2 years ago, I think. And it involves a lot of collection of data of the existing systems and the plant operations and all of our wastewater facilities to put it all together. And then ultimately, we go through the process of public hearings, public meetings, and submission to DEM and for preliminary review and approval, and we're in that stage right now, all together with all that. So with that said, I will pass it off to our consultants here, and they have a PowerPoint presentation that they put together to breeze through, and then we can have questions.
Okay. Before we start, guys, introduce yourselves, but I hope I'm not stealing your thunder. Can you explain why we do this plan, why it's important to do it, and what the ramifications are?
That's slide number 1.
Okay, great.
We will get to that.
Thank you.
I'm Andrew Smith, and this is my my colleague Ryan Bargnarek.
Andy, you can pull that in front of you.
There we go. I'm used to the podiums, not the not
well,
down.
the podium, we talked about it when, again, we tried making this a conversation, so we took the podium out and just
It's perfect.
brought in
Absolutely.
the tables.
All right. Does this have a clicker to forward the slides? Or? Oh, there we go. All right, so I'll give you a quick overview of our presentation. First, we're going to discuss why we do the wastewater facilities plans. Then we will look at, the other items we'll look at are the collection system, the Scarborough wastewater treatment plant, which is owned by the town of Narragansett. There's a regional wastewater treatment facility where Narragansett sends flow, and that's owned by South Kingstown, but it's located in Narragansett. Then we'll talk about the recommended plan for your wastewater needs, and then sort of a quick summary. I have questions and discussion at the end, but as you guys have questions, please feel free to make it conversational and ask as we go along. All right. Why do we do wastewater facilities planning? Well, it's a townwide plan. It's for a 20-year period. It is a Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management requirement. And the reason we do it is we need to review, we have to look at what areas are sewered. We need to do planning for economic development. We need to do planning for environmental compliance and for protecting the nature here, the Narrow River, the beaches. And the way we do it is the first part, we look at your wastewater collection system. There are pipes, pump stations. We look at the capacity. We look at inflow and infiltration. That's water that's getting to your sewer system that shouldn't be, either from sump pumps and things like that, or from groundwater infiltration. We looked at your wastewater treatment plant on Ocean Road by Scarborough Beach. That has a permit governed by Rhode Island DEM. We looked at compliance with that permit, whether the plant's ability to meet that compliance. We looked at whether it had enough capacity for your needs now and for your needs in the future. And then finally, we looked at your regional wastewater plant. The regional wastewater plant is located in Narragansett, but it's owned by South Kingstown, and it's shared by 3 regional partners, Narragansett, South Kingstown, and the University of Rhode Island. So we did review the capacity of that plant. The basic process here is we evaluate the existing conditions and identify your needs for the future, how much you might be okay at year 1, but you might need a certain additional capacity by year 20. We looked at alternatives to meet those needs, and then we have a recommended 20-year plan. So first we'll look at the existing conditions. Next slide. To look at your wastewater needs.
John, before you go ahead, doing these updates, is this required by the state, or is this something we just, as a planning board event or engineering, we just make up?
It is required by the state.
Okay, what are the ramifications if you don't do this?
Well, one thing is, riding, you won't be, if you don't have projects within the facility plan, then you cannot go for any financing through RIDEM, through the infrastructure bank. That's one of the things. And it's really part of RIDEM's really looking to that as you get different types of projects that you want to bring forward, and any upgrades that you bring at the plant, you go through an order of approval stage with them as well.
Thank you.
But really, it is a requirement, and there's some financial implications by not doing that.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
So to identify your wastewater needs, first we looked at the planning area, in this case, the town of Narragansett. We looked at town demographics, the population, the housing stock. We looked at environmental factors. You guys have some special management areas, the Narrow River. You have some great public beaches, and so those are all factors that are considered. We looked at the soil types in Narragansett. The soil types in Narragansett are not conducive to traditional septic systems and their long-term success, so that's another factor that goes into this. We reviewed your community comprehensive plan so that we understood the town's goals for economic development, housing, and those needs. And then we looked at a whole bunch of operating data from your wastewater plants. We looked at the flows coming in, the waste loads coming in, and then we looked at, we projected those waste loads for the projected increase in population, for projected development in town, for the potential. Another factor in this was investigating the potential of expanding fish processing at the Port of Galilee. Historically, there was additional fish processing there, an economic boon to the town. And in the wastewater facilities are one of the limiting factors for that industry.
That sign, was from Narragansett beer.
Go back 2, I think. So the town's collection system, you actually have 2 collection systems. The north part of town flows to the regional wastewater treatment plant. There's about 14 town-owned pump stations, some additional private pump stations, 2 major sewer interceptors, and this area of town sort of roughly coincides with your planning districts, the north and the central planning districts. The south part of town, the collection system there flows to the Scarborough wastewater treatment plant. There's, I believe, 5 or 6 pump stations in that area. Again, 2 interceptors, and yes, all flow there goes to the Scarborough treatment plant. That system is owned completely by the town.
I'm going to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt. So we keep talking about Scarborough. So again, thinking of somebody at home, where is the regional plant located?
The regional plant is on Westmoreland Street, up near Stop and Shop,
Thank you.
behind Mariner Square.
The other question is age of the infrastructure in the north and the age of the infrastructure in the south, especially pipes.
The Scarborough treatment plant was built in 1982. The regional plant was built in the mid-70s. So John, you may be able to know a little better. Are the sewers older than that, or?
Yeah, definitely in some of the center areas of town, down here near the pier, there are some older systems. There's some pipes that are probably pre-1900 down there. Not a lot. There was a lot of the systems were built, and there was initial construction then, and there was some work in the 40s, and then I believe that replaced a lot of that stuff. And then we did in the 80s and 90s, there were major upgrades. So a lot of it's been replaced. But so most of the sewer systems could be, on the order of 40 or 50 years old. At that point, we haven't had any really new sewer construction, even since the 90s. Other than Briggs Farm is the most recent. So all that stuff's new. Briggs down in the south end was built in 06. So all that stuff is just finishing up the bond issue that was funded that project. So most of it is still within reasonable operating age, but it is aging.
Thank you.
All right, next slide. So we evaluated the city's pump stations. Many of the pump stations are, they're just aging. The mechanical equipment in most pump stations is 20 plus years old. So it's really, upgrades have been made along the way, but there's, quite a bit that's, pumps, electrical panels, grinders, mixers, those sorts of things. They have a lifespan, and, there's quite a bit that's aging. Yeah, a typical lifespan for these mechanical equipment, we usually design it for, 20 to 25 year lifespan. And here is the Scarborough wastewater treatment plant. I'm going to walk you through the treatment process here. So flow will come from the sewer in the street. The service comes in, the sewer service to the plant flows in here and goes to this area right here. This is the headworks, we call it. And this has some screening and some grit removal equipment. So we get rid of any debris or grit that's in the system before it gets to its main treatment process. Then we go to the influent pump station. This is a lift station. This pump station will push flow up to this right here. This is the heart of your treatment process. This is an oxidation ditch. So what happens here is there are bacteria that live in this system. We call it a mixed liquor, and that bacteria is what actually treats the biochemical oxygen demand that we're trying to get rid of to release clean water into the ocean. So what happens is the flow will come in here, it'll go around these rings, concentric rings, and that gets it enough time of treatment. And then in the middle, it flows over a little weir and then flows to these tanks right here. These are called the secondary clarifiers. And these tanks, all the solids that have been treated settle to the bottom, and they're pumped and disposed of. The clean water flows over the top of these tanks, or over a weir in these tanks, and goes to this tank right here, which is your disinfection tank. Here, the flow is treated with chlorine to get any bacteria, and then it's actually dechlorinated before it goes out to where it's discharged out to Rhode Island Sound. Now, the solids that I mentioned are collected in a tank, sludge, and there's a process in this building where we dewater that sludge. So it's basically we pull some water out of it so that then a truck can come and hauls the liquid sludge away to a disposal facility. Next slide.
May I? Yeah, before you leave that, I remember, you can bring that slide back. We talked about this a long time ago. This was put up, I think, because of the sea level, the rise in sea level. Can you discuss that? Is that adequate?
Yeah, the berm was constructed, I believe, in 2017. It was constructed to elevation 20, I believe. The flood elevation at the plant, as it currently stands, is 19 or 17 with, and I would have to check what sea level rise is, but that we are in the process of doing a resiliency plan, which is also required by DEM. And the berm does protect the treatment plant sufficiently from that standpoint. So everything behind the berm is protected. And they even at that time we got the map modification LOMR for the area because it's a little postage stamp carved out of the actual floodplain and the ocean flooding area is protected by the berm there. So our insurance rates are reduced for the facility. So the berm is in place and still functional.
Thank you.
In fact, we did, and another piece of that, we just completed to the right of this picture, there's the outfall. There was a rock jetty that was constructed on it called a groin, and that we reconstructed and rebuilt just this past year and a half. So that's an additional measure to provide resiliency to the plant itself.
So when we evaluated the treatment plant, again, this was built in 1982, and there have been some equipment replacement along the way. But again, the plant as a whole, what we found was, a lot of the equipment was aging. The picture on the left is showing the pumps in the influent pump station. The picture on the right here is showing the sludge pumps, which transfer the sludge from the treatment process to the holding tank and to the truck for disposal. Next slide. And this slide shows on the left shows the oxidation ditch, which is the main treatment process. You see the blue motors here. These are actually blowers and mixers, and what they do is they inject air into the tank, and that air supply is critical for the bacteria to successfully treat the sewage. On the right, we show the settling tank. This is the weir that the clean water flows over. And what we found with your treatment process is for your existing flow rates right now, this process is undersized to treat those peak summer seasons. So I will say, your operators work hard, and they've done, I guess, yeoman's work to sort of keep this plant meeting what it does, but it is in need of a capacity increase, which we'll discuss more shortly. On the left is the chlorine contact tank for disinfection. And on the right shows a photo of the gravity belt thickener, which that's what actually dewaters your sludge before it's transported for disposal. The reason we dewater it is, instead of, several trucks, you get, it's just, less trucking, less expensive to dispose of. All right, now, the existing conditions at your regional plant. The history of your regional plant. In 1972 was the original agreement. In that original agreement, Narragansett owned 19% of the plant, which was 0.78 MGD, or million gallons per day, or 784,000 gallons per day was what they were allotted. That was not enough for the town at the time. In 1991 was the first capacity expansion, and that was shared by South Kingstown and Narragansett. So that gave Narragansett an additional 430,000 gallons per day. So the current capacity of that plant that you own is 1.2 million gallons per day, or 24% of the plant. In the time since then,
Got a question.
Yeah, hindsight is very clear, isn't it? Why did we choose 19%? It just seems like a low, 19% of the entire capacity. Was that we were saving money, they were going to pay more to build it, or do you know the politics?
No, I don't have any idea. I know that the earliest planning documents I saw, I think, date back to 1965, some McGuire engineering reports. It's just the way they divvied up and projected the flows from the areas. So, and I've made the comments when discussing it with URI and SK that, yeah, right from the get-go, we'd never had enough. Because, we built the plant in 72, or the agreements were in 72, the plant came online in 79, 78, 79, and then within, 12 years, we were at 1990, we were already way over what we were allotted. So the planning documents just weren't accurate for whatever reason. I don't know if it was political decisions or whether the planning was limited to a specific area for some reason, or they just never expected the north end to expand as much as it had. I
don't think you can blame the planning board, but I don't know.
Okay, Tom, go ahead. No, you go.
So you've used the language a couple times saying that South Kingston owns the plant, and then you just said Narragansett owns capacity. My understanding is this was authorized by a special act of the General Assembly, and that who financed the construction of the plant?
the capital cost of the plant was at the percentages.
Shared.
Was shared,
Right.
yes.
So I guess is this for lack of a better word, a partnership, or is it South Kingston owns it and we're just basically buying capacity?
No, it is, when he said owns, it's the responsibility, they're the managing partner. So I don't know what horse trading went on in the past to have it cited in Narragansett, but South Kingstown being the managing partner. But South Kingstown, it's all South Kingstown town staff. There's no Narragansett town staff that works at the plant. South Kingstown operates the plant, and we basically pay a bill at the end of the year. Well, we pay quarterly over time in advance, and then there's an adjustment at the end of the year based on the actual operating costs. So they manage the facility, they operate the facility, but in terms of the capital ownership, it's all based on those percentages in the far right column.
So
So the town paid for it. There were some loans and possibly some federal grant monies involved when it was originally built, but URI, SK, and Narragansett all paid capital costs. And I don't know if, like, now the way it works on a major equipment or capital improvement, SK will manage the contract, they go out to bid, it's the town of South Kingstown bid, and then we will pay South Kingstown our portion of the share. They'll bill us that share, and then they distribute it back to the contractor to pay those costs off. So we don't have a direct contract with any of the contractors.
if you go to the assessor's database, the land is owned by South Kingston.
I'd have to check that.
Yeah, I think it is, but,
Yeah, it may have been transferred that way
right.
too, so.
But I think probably a better way to describe this is it is a partnership. It's been basically on a pro rata basis as it was set up. The investment, the original investment was on that, was on the 19% basis from Narragansett. To the extent that there's any additional capital costs going forward, it's shared on the basis of that percentage, correct?
No, the way, those are based on the original.
But it's
plan
24%
construction.
now for us.
But that's our capital ownership, as we say, is the 24%.
Right,
The way the capital costs, like because we have not, when we would get to an expansion, then we would need to, and I believe they have it covered in some of the rest of the facilities plan, it would be on a pro rata basis for what our needs are and who needs what, how much capacity. URI does not need any more capacity, or they've said in the past they may be looking for some more now, I'm not sure, but the future expansion would be based on whatever pro rata share to get us to the next piece, and I believe the numbers are 33 or 34% is ultimately what the actual requirement is. But, for now, like, we've had equipment replacements, replacing clarifier equipment and replacing, any kind of usable, not consumable, but larger equipment that costs significant amounts of money to replace. Those are based on what our flow percentage is. We pay the operating bill based on the flow percentage.
So John, you don't have to go to that level of detail. I just want to make clear in my own mind and in the mind of anyone else there, this is a jointly owned facility for which essentially the owners have contracted with, for lack of a better word, contracted with the town of South Kingston to operate the plant. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I had a similar, and I think this is the biggest confusion within the town, not even with people, but people within the government of the town, as to what this relationship is. So capital replacement and equipment replacement are still both based on the 24%? Or, again, we're trying
Yes.
to...
Well, it's a combination.
Oh.
Any of the equipment, ideally, everybody would use the same, their use would be the same as what their ownership, the original buy-in was, and everybody would have the same, but needless to say, Narragansett is not. So our operating costs, when we pay the operating costs for the plant, we pay that based on our proportional flow share, which in the past, since I've been here, the last 5 or 6 years, has been historically on a 44 to 45% of the total plant flow. And when we've done major equipment replacements that don't involve increasing capacity at the plant, they're just to replace worn out equipment, we pay based on whatever the flow, our flow percentage of that, because, the reasoning behind that is we used more up by putting more flow in there, so we should pay more to replace it. But it doesn't impact it's not included in any readjustment of the original capital ownership.
Right. So equipment, though, is based on capital ownership, the 24%.
The original construction is the 24%, but we've replaced the clarifier mechanisms over there, and we paid 35 or 40%, depending on what was in place at the time. So any capital costs, any projects over there to replace equipment, or construct anything that doesn't involve expanding the plant is the pro rata basis is based on flow,
Based on
what we
flow, okay.
flow.
Wanted to clarify that because
So it's a
people,
combination of both, and it's,
Right.
unfortunately, it is confusing,
Right.
and it's spelled out. I won't say it's spelled out clearly in
Yeah,
in the
it's-
agreements, but it's spelled out.
well, it's all, yeah, it's specifically vague. So the other question people have is, well, we're at 24%, but we're operating at 44 to 45%. Where's that coming from?
Well, the 45% is what of the flow that's going to the plant. The plant is sized, it can handle 5 MGD, but we're only sending 3.1, 3.2 MGD there. So we're 44% of what all the flows are to the plant. So our 44% of what goes to the plant is all and then some of what we own and lease.
Right,
of that.
so-
So that's the problem.
Right,
So
so,
South Kingstown is not using all of their capacity. URI is not using all of their capacity, and we're using more than, or Narragansett is using more than their share of capacity. So the operating costs shift towards the
okay.
town of Narragansett.
Thank you. This is where I'm trying to get it because people are totally confused by this. So we're operating above our ownership level. Okay. Now, is this, I'm trying to figure out how to word this like somebody at home and not some geek with a PhD in engineering. So the incremental above the 24%, that's coming from our other two partners, percentage-wise, theoretically.
What we're using?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we have to borrow capacity.
We have to borrow
Well,
capacity.
we're using their unused
So,
capacity.
so we're using their unused. Are we using it at a, do we have a hard contractual agreement with them on that? Is it a month by month? Is it peak flow? How is that percentage determined and fixed so that Narragansett can exceed from 24% to 44%?
Yeah, it's addressed in the agreements, and there is a volumetric sharing agreement that was entered right after, sometime after the first lease agreement we had with URI. In the past, we had leased anywhere, 400,000 gallons a day to what we lease now, 200,000 gallons a day from URI. But we're trying to negotiate an extension to that lease. At this time, right now, the last cost of it was $70,000 a year for that 200,000 gallons a day. But that's, the basis for that, I think, goes back to some of the original negotiations in 94, 95, when the first lease was signed. I think it started out at $125,000 for 400,000 gallons a day, or maybe 75, went up to 150. At some point, it was $140,000 for 400, and it dropped back down to 70, and it had been 70 for years and years and years. But there was a fixed fee annually for the 200,000 gallons from URI, and that was supposed to keep us below 80% of what our capacity was based on some of the agreements, because the 80% number triggers a lot of, within our agreements and within the permits, requirements to do plant expansions.
So are we staying under that at this point?
No, we're not under. We're at or above our leased and owned threshold, whether it's 200,000 gallons or 400. We're above what we were allotted.
Okay, and that lease is from the University of Rhode Island.
Yes.
We pay that annually. When is that agreement up?
June 30th, 2025.
Okay.
So
And
it's
then-
expired, and we're
It
negotiating an
expired.
expansion.
You're
yes.
negotiating it now, okay. We have no lease with South Kingston, or we do?
No, there's no lease with South Kingstown. There's one of the older agreements back, I believe, around 90 was that they would not refuse to allow us to use the share, and there's some convoluted language towards either buying back or compensating, but I think then it was more handshake type agreements in there to just say, if we have capacity, we're not going to charge you for it, but we're at the point now where we're the plant is going to need an expansion to accommodate, to accommodate all the flow, and it's just about time for that. So that's where we're trying to look to get the cost sharing put together.
Yeah, I read it a couple times. It's specifically vague. Is South Kingstown, where are they on their capacity?
I think their exact numbers, well, let's see, we're running at 45%. They're probably like 30-some percent, and URI is going to be maybe 15 or 20% of the total plant flow. So off the top of my head, I'm not positive, but
Okay.
they're probably in the 60 to 70 maybe range.
Percent of their capacity?
I'd say 50 to 60 of their own capacity,
Okay.
most likely.
All right. Thank you. And again, we're not asking you to come up with stuff that you don't know. If you don't know, say it.
Yeah.
We're just trying to educate people as to what, because a lot of people really don't understand the facilities and what they do. I did want to stop at the Scarborough in that you talked about capacity there, and you said there is some capacity there. But I remember when you came before us before, you talked about the fact that you intentionally try to keep some capacity there because there's a lot of septic systems that are going to have to come off and go into the sewer system. And so is there enough cushion in that for those properties to come off, or are you going to be looking at something serious there too?
No, they'll get into those numbers
Okay,
later, but
Thank you.
it is covered, and
All right.
they'll discuss that.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't mean to take up the floor, so just trying to.
I just got one quick follow-up. Does the agreement that we have with the University of Rhode Island to lease 200,000 gallons of space, is it offset by what the Bay Campus is contributing?
No, it's not. We charge the Bay Campus a standard user rate, so the Bay Campus is part of our flows. Off the top of my head, I don't know exactly what amount of that capacity, but if we were to do that and split that out and make URI responsible for that, we would need to charge them less we would still charge them for conveyance through our system, but the treatment aspect would be
I'm
taken
less
from the
worried
plant.
about the economics as I am just
But no,
trying
it's
to
they're
trying to
built-
understand.
yeah, they're billed
there
as
is
a customer. Yeah,
There's a
they're just-
demand that contributed to the plant that comes from URI that's not accounted for the purposes of that agreement right now. It's simply, when the agreement was put together, it was focused on the main campus.
Yes,
And the Bay Campus was not part of that.
There's
correct?
no discounting or addition to the 200,000 because the Bay Campus is part of our flow that goes to the plant.
And there's not a master meter on the Bay Campus to know how much flow is going to the plant?
We bill off of the metered water use. I believe they have a private pump station down there. I'm not positive, but I believe it all gets to that pump station before it's pumped to us, and they would have a meter on it if they have it metered in any way, shape, in any way there. That's the only way it would be metered. So all we do is we bill based on flow off of metered water use.
Okay, thank you.
Steve?
I got just one quick one. If you could just refresh me what the current flow is to the shared plant? We're
right-
talking about our percentages of capacity. I want to know the percentage
Yeah,
of overall
I
capacity.
think they've
we're
got a
using.
flow table in there, but I think the total flow on average is about 3.1, 3.2 million gallons annually, and we're 44% of that, so whatever
Okay.
so we're, it's 400 and it's like 1.2, 1.3 MGD.
All right, so
give or take.
is that 3.2 MGD or
Yeah.
yearly? Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's-
it's rated for 5. Collectively, we're all together using 3.2.
Yeah.
So we're getting close.
So we're close to the 80% that would trigger mandatory expansion.
Gotcha.
Under
And-
regulatory rules.
I'm sure it's going to come up later, but I'm going to ask now because it's on the top of my head. Are we thinking about doing a capital expansion there for ourselves? for our own capacity?
That's what
It's
this
coming up, yeah, I
document
knew it was
is.
coming.
That's what this document is set up. And again, and I know URI or South Kingstown has reached out and is, wondering what we're going to do about it because we have to resolve our capacity issues here. So I think ultimately that's what the conclusion of this is for us to continue going there and to maintain permit. The plant needs to be expanded over there. And then the sharing of that will be, hopefully we can come up with some specific agreements to make it all work properly.
One more quick question. The regional plant's 20-year plan is older than Narragansett's Scarborough plant's 20-year plan. Are they in the process of updating their plan? And if so, where are they?
They are in the very preliminary stages. They've been, DEM has required them to do that, and I believe SK has just submitted a schedule. Whether DEM has approved it or not, I'm not positive. SK has sent us that information, so they're in the very preliminary stages. And again, some of it is chicken and egg type of thing. They really need to have our flows and have us project what we have from the tributary area to it so that they can go put that plan together. And then I think then it comes together with a negotiation process of, okay, how are we going to make all this happen? Because, like you said, Steve, that's one way to do it is like, well, we need 1 million gallons a day extra, so we're going to build it. But SK has to manage the whole contract and do the whole thing. We can't really, just the way the agreements are, unless we come up with an agreement. And believe me, I don't want that headache of having to put that expansion together because we're going to have the Scarborough facility to work with as well. But yeah, that's the plan, is to put this all in motion and get it all resolved, permanently instead of having it linger around for 4 years.
I just want to backtrack because I see even some people here going, URI Bay campus goes into which plant?
It goes to the regional plant, yeah. They're up all of Bonnet, they come through Bonnet and that way, and through a couple of our pump stations before it gets there.
I'm asking this for people at home. I sadly read this. So it goes into the plant. It counts as our percentage, not URI's percentage. And we charge them a user fee as if any other business in the community.
Yeah, they're a street sewer customer.
All right. And that user fee does not offset the cost of our agreement with them for extra capacity. It's just, it goes against our operational costs.
Yeah, it goes into the wastewater enterprise fund.
Yep.
And part of that money would go back to pay all of our operating costs, which the $70,000 is included in.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify because we went through a lot of stuff quickly. Okay, thank you, guys, and appreciate your patience with asking questions. This is really something, usually we try to hold our questions to the end, but it's really something that I think it's essential for people at home to understand as we go.
I think we covered this one.
Would you just go back to that slide for a second? The average daily flow or the max month average flow, I know what they are, but it would be useful to understand because averages don't really
Sure,
mean a lot.
I can explain that.
So,
All right, so all these numbers, there's a lot of numbers up here, so there's a lot going on. So we'll just start at the top. The treatment capacity that Narragansett, owns based on the capital agreements, 1.2 MGD. Lease capacity from Rhode Island, 0.2 MGD. So right now they have an available capacity to use 1.4 MGD. Now, the average daily flow is all the flow from the whole year divided by 365, essentially. So if you average out the year, right now, Narragansett is sending 750,000 gallons, or 0.75 MGD, to the treatment plant. Let me skip this one for a second. Max month. So the maximum month is sort of the, so 1.69 MGD is typically that would be a rolling 30-day average. So in this case, what it is it's the total for a month divided by the number of days in a month, and that gives you the maximum month, which practically what that says is over an extended period of time, this is what you're sending, during high flow seasons, sort of, when you have tourists in town and all the summer cottages are occupied. That sort of shows what you're sending to the plant.
That's what I was going to ask. So is that July or August, essentially?
It is, typically it would be, July and August. But sometimes you do have high flows in the winter, and that would typically come from, frozen ground, on a wet season when you're getting that infiltration inflow that you don't want.
But just to clarify that, really the problem we have is that our 1.2 at the top should really be that 1.69 at the bottom. That's, you want to design your plant to have the capacity to handle your worst month or your heaviest loading month, and then everything else is working. There's a max day that's more, but that's a different aspect of it. So that's where where we're shortfalling there, and the plant design and the permits would all be based on that max month.
It's rare that you have an average day, because it's an average. It's basically averaging a lot of up and down over the course of a period of time.
Yes.
So here's the question: what do you know? Do you have a number for what the minimum 30-day flow is?
I do, actually. It is. I wrote it down if I brought the right paper here. It is, well, I know it's about 60% of the average day, about 65% of the average day. So that's
Okay.
2/3 of that, which would be like point. I'm an engineer. I'm not good at math in my head, though. 0.6, something like that.
In absent frozen ground and a storm, would you expect that month to be December, January?
I would probably, yeah, or November or March or the cooler, drier months. Yep.
I would expect December, January, just based on occupancy.
I have two
Yep.
questions before we leave this slide. One, in the new negotiations with the university, if they, in their strategic plan, in the back of their head, are looking to expand housing on campus, which they've talked about doing, there's nothing in the agreements to say that they can take back capacity from us in the next obviously, we're set for this contract, but in the new one, they could reduce our share based on their need. It's not that they're going to. I'm not asking you that. But theoretically, they could.
Well, yeah, they can't take any of our 24% that we
No.
actually own,
The part that we lease from them.
With the lease, well,
If they feel they
that's the
need it,
issue. Yeah, they don't,
it's not guaranteed.
yeah, exactly.
It's guaranteed for the length of the contract, but it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, and when we request it, I provided an analysis of it, that basically the 2 MGD is about using up about 25% of their available excess, and if we went to 4.4 MGD, it's using up about 50. So they have capacity there. They've got a new dorm, and I know they're planning on putting stuff online in a year and a half or 2 years. But dorms and that stuff, it's not as heavy a loading as regular residential or any kind of real development. So they should have plenty of capacity to handle that too.
Okay.
But I haven't seen the numbers, I think, for what their projections are for those.
And my other follow-up, the swings, obviously, they're due to swings in rentals and, population shifts from people coming home from Florida, et cetera, so forth and so on. How much, though, is also from inflow within the system? Any guess of a percentage? Or is this all just population swings and usage?
In the north end, there's a lot of, both ends. We got some I&I issues down in the Scarborough area, or Sand Hill Cove area as well. But the effect of rain, especially in this north end and in this area of town, is pretty significant. The flows don't vary as much in the north end. I think the population basis is a little more steady. But we've had some, it really, it's the rain is what really has pushed us over the top with a lot of these real closest to the capacity in our threshold.
And for people at home, engineering, we talk about flows, we talk about a closed system and open system. So this, in theory, is supposed to be a relatively closed system where whatever goes in to the pipes comes out at the plant. In reality, when we talk about inflow, that is stuff that is infiltrating the system from the outside, typically storms. It can be other things where some pumps that are pumped into things and all of that, but usually storms, and usually pretty good ones. So thank you, guys. Tom?
This will be my last one on URI, I promise. In an earlier life, I worked at the University of Connecticut, and we controlled both sides. We had diversion permits for water, and we had NEPIDs on the backside. We grew the campus from 1995 to 2000 and almost 15, growing the student population, growing the amount of space on campus, and growing employment, and reducing water usage, and reducing the demand on the plant. When you negotiate with URI, because what happens is you're taking old buildings offline, you're replacing them with new buildings, you're using much more water efficient sinks, toilets, showers, the whole 9 yards. And you have to understand when you're dealing with URI, not only, yes, they have a plan and they have financing in place now to add 1,000 beds, but they're going to be taking beds offline, and you need to understand what net they're going to be adding there as you go forward. So I'd simply encourage you, as you walk through this, the fact that they're adding more beds on campus, you have to think about net, and you also have to think that they're going to be more efficient, so the demand there may not be as high as you think. It's not necessarily a one-for-one.
Steve, your floor. By the way, Steve was very excited. This is his favorite subject.
I love it. I put in septic systems for years, private septic systems, so I am familiar with poop and its treatment. But something I wasn't as familiar with before the last time you came before us was the effect of sump pumps on our sewer system. Because when you're a homeowner or even a builder or a developer, you think, put in the pipe, it's just water, don't worry about it. But that's clearly not true. You've all said now that our peak flow season is tied to rainfall and tied to storm events, which raises the water table, and you've hypothesized on several occasions that sump pumps are a major factor. Have you had any constructive ideas? Obviously, we don't want to go into people's houses, but aside from trying to educate them at meetings like this, that they should put a dry well in and try and get those sump pumps out of the sewer lines, is there anything you can think of? And I don't want to put you on the spot. We can think about this more. I'd love to work some idea out where we can incentivize people to pull those out of the sewer system. That seems like a cheap and easy way to get our consumption down.
Well, yeah, that's the key, incentivization on that aspect. We have, we've been trying to follow up on the last significant I&I study, which was done about 10 years ago in the central, or in the old section of town here, called the Condon Street Pump Station area. But and part of that is, to educate the people, but part of it is, hey, we did a study. It looks like you might have something in your house. Can we come in and look? And we haven't had permission. But the problem with a dry well or anything like that, as we talked about before, the soils and the groundwater conditions are not conducive to, you can put that dry well down there, but it's going to fill up with water, and then where do you put your water? So, whether it's a separate, stormwater or a subdrain, underdrain system that people could connect the sump pumps to, and we built that out. And those are the things where, you've got resiliency planning and grant funds and things like that around it we need to look at as well, because, I think it's a combination of all that. I think, ultimately, this plan, we'll try and reduce the flows to the extent possible. Tom, you talked about water savings, and that's really what got the water savings and the water saving fixtures, I think, is what got us from 400,000 gallons a day to 200,000 gallons a day on our lease with URI. But now we've approved a lot of connections, we've had expansion, and we're back up against the number again. So it's going to be a combination of all those things, and we're going to look to try and make the most economical and most most sense technically.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
I warned you we have questions.
that's all right. So, so now going back to, we sort of looked at the existing conditions. Now, we're going to start talking about sort of some of the future needs here. So in the south collection system, which discharges to Scarborough, you can see the map there. The purple area is Seward area, already has sewers. The green is open space, dedicated open space, so there'll be no development. And then the blue, the light blue, which you can see, is areas without sewers. So notably, you can see, Great Island, Harbor Island, Baltimore Avenue. So these are the areas that have been identified for sewer expansion to relieve, the on-site treatment systems. And then you can see on the slides, Great Island is 375 residential units, on down to, the houses along Sand Hill Cove Road, 30 units. So so the plan to sort of provide sewers for those areas, results in that many new units.
So if I looked at the last plan, I think all of those areas would be on the last plan.
Yes, at least I think 6 out of 7 of them were.
So, which means
Yep.
none of them got done
None of them got
in
done.
20
correct.
years. And so the question I'm asking is, what's a reasonable expectation of what will get done over the course of the next 20 years because of the cost and expense associated with doing that?
So I guess it would depend on the, it's going to depend on the pocketbook, I would assume, right?
Yeah, that's what the plan will come up with. I know the existing plan with Great Island, Harbor Island in particular, it was, well, if the residents come forward with it and we want to do it, but those things really weren't. They were areas to be sewered, but they weren't included in any of the economic, and costs. Now, this plan in the draft form has those costs in there, but if that ends up coming out or how we work it, but that is ultimately, that's the big question: where's the money going to come from, and how are we going to sequence it? Because right now, I don't think we have an extreme amount of failing septics on either of those any more than, say, 20 years ago. So it's really a need-based, those things, those type of things. It'll be a need-based decision, I think.
I guess the question I have is, does it need to be funded out of the enterprise fund, or the costs for extending sewer is borne by the area where the sewer is extended to?
Generally, of the size of the amount of financing we'll need, it would need to be a bonded project, and then that would really be funded by the people who benefit directly. So, there are estimates in the plan for the Great Island sewers and those extensions. Obviously, if the treatment capacity, if the plant is going to be expanded to accommodate that, those assessments would need to be, those numbers of properties would need to be included, but they wouldn't be paying the same proportion. That would be spread out over all the users to expand the plant. But if the plant capacity is being increased just to accommodate those parcels, then they would be the ones covering the bill, and then there would be a separate cost for upgrading equipment and the like that would be borne by all the customers and the enterprise fund.
And the total cost would include not just the expansion of the plant, but also putting the pipes in the ground?
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
connections,
there's
and the connections
separate-
from the houses as well, right?
Yeah, they've got separate, and then ultimately, the individual property owners are ultimately responsible for the connection from the house to the building sewer and to the main. You know, generally, if it's a new sewer construction project, you know, and it's town-sponsored, or, well, whatever the sewer extension is, sewer collection system would go down the center line of the street roughly, and then you would have the lateral connections brought to the property line, and then the property owners would be responsible for bringing it in from there.
Well, while the failure rate may be consistent over the last 20 years, and Steve, you probably can be better than I do. I do know that, especially when you're looking at Harbor Island and Great Island and anywhere else around the water, any water, the new modern systems are drastically more expensive than when my father put one in years ago. So that's, you know, when you're talking about the connection costs and stuff, that's where you need to look at, okay, what's going to cost to put one in the ground, and then look at the cost benefit of both. So, okay, thank you.
Next slide, I think. So similarly in the north, again, the purple is sewered areas, the green is open space, and you know, Bonnet Shores, Bonnet Shores, and there's Wandsworth Street was a smaller area near the regional plant, which were identified for sewer expansion.
Can I ask, so in the comp plan, it talks about avoiding extending sewers to areas that are environmentally sensitive, and I don't know if you thought about that in the plan to extend or not.
Yes. So in discussions with Rhode Island DEM, the areas, the special area management plans for the Narrow River, there are certain guidelines on where those sewer extensions can be done, and then there's some, you know, when you're transferring water from one basin to another, there's some limitations. The feedback from Rhode Island DEM is they would actually look favorably upon sewer extensions in that area, mainly because of the nitrogen loading to the estuary, and it would alleviate some of that and promote the health of the estuary.
So water quality of Narrow River and
Yes.
of the salt pond.
Correct. Yep.
I've got a general question. In your process here, in recent years, the state legislature has adopted ordinances for building and zoning that really changed the focus for local communities and the demand for capacity. Did you consider any of the new legislation in all of this?
Yes.
Okay, great.
We did. Yeah, and we initially looked at the build analysis in your community comprehensive plan, you know, looking at what the plans were from the 2016 plan, and then we re-looked at it with the new regulations and how, you know, the ADUs and substandard lots and how some of those things would affect the potential needs for development and the flows from development.
Thank you.
Can I quick follow-up on Mark's? Did you use a standard number of persons per resident?
Yes.
That number 2.7?
We used 2.4.
So to the extent that there is legislation that would enable houses to have 5, for example, unrelated people in them, and we have a substantial rental market academically in Narragansett on both the north and the south side, that would not be reflected in some of the assumptions that you've made?
Well, the assumptions based on the, we use census data for the population, you know, and housing data, and that data is, you know, about 2.4 people per household on the average. And then we would plan for 70 gallons per day of wastewater per person.
Right, but the law's just changed, and its effect in terms of occupancy, the density of occupancy through the academic, through the academic year is potentially quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up on that because I have the same question. I was going to ask later when you started getting into your assumptions of flow, but, and our council hasn't decided anything. In fact, we have a hearing coming up to talk about this, but the law says no less than one person per bedroom, a maximum of 5, which would allow 5 people in a one-bedroom house. And what we're starting to already see on the portals for student rentals is 3- and 4-bedroom homes being listed now for 5 students. So that would have a significant impact on flow. And I think that's what, and I don't want to put words in Tom's mouth, but that's one of the concerns for us on the infrastructure side when we look at that, is if you have an average of 3-bedroom homes that have 3 students, and now they have 4 to 5 students instead of 3, and you're making your assumptions on 3 bedrooms or 2.4 per household. And again, the council has not made a decision in which way. We've made a recommendation to them to say 1 person per bedroom, a max of 5. They've not decided, and we're going to have a workshop together, and it'll be their decision. They're the policymakers. But should they decide to stay with no less than 1 per bedroom, does that alter your flow?
No, I think we have to look at it from a standpoint of we do not develop the population projections. So the census comes up with a number. If there's another number that can be projected, but we would have to have that basis. So, you know, I think what you guys looked at more higher and increased density over what our current zoning is, more or less. There's some increased density that's allowed under in terms of structural building and facilities by the new legislation, and we applied the 2.4 persons per unit, you know, and using that, if to try and project a different number, we would be, you know, we would have to come up with some justification for it, but
Right.
you know, I don't think anybody's come up with those numbers yet.
No, I'm just saying that that's sitting out there. And again, we don't know, the council will have to decide that. That's a policy decision, and that's strictly up to them. But the impacts, to me, I've done I've done similar studies, and you try to look at census, but usually that's 10 years out of date. And you look at zoning, but zoning changes, and in the last 2 years, zoning has significantly changed from the state level as far as densities are concerned and things like that. This could have the biggest impact at the worst times, based on what you're saying, is our peak times. You know, where you've got winter peaks because of storms and frozen ground, water tables, et cetera, so forth. That would be a spike in student population. And then in the summers, you'd have rentals, and that would be a spike. So that might be beyond what you're considering. I'm just asking you to consider it and keep it in the back of your mind. And it would also, you know, obviously it will depend on what our leaders decide to do.
Mark, I could, oh, sorry, Rupert, you want to go?
I was going to say, I'd just say, initially we used RIDEMs. Historically, they use 300 gallons per day per unit for a house. They've directed us through our comments with them when the review of the draft to go with a population number times 70 gallons per day. So that's where the 2.4. So effectively, we went from 300 gallons per day to about 170 per unit is what came down through the working with RIDEM and their comments. So they were kind of like, when it's a known development and it's well thought out, the larger number, they typically want to see that like in an order of approval. As we get to a larger planning development where not all of it will come to fruition, as we can see since the last 20 years, they want to use a more tamped down planning number so that it doesn't overestimate.
Thank you.
So I think we're in a situation where we don't want to underestimate. And if you look at the summer months here, you look at the population in July and August, and the flow in July and August is very different. the last time I saw a situation like this, I was doing an environmental impact statement for the expansion of a large football stadium. And the town's wastewater treatment system couldn't handle halftime. So how do you handle halftime? And I think we're in the situation of how do we handle the flows in July and August? Because on my street, the houses that normally have 1 and 2 people in them, right now I have 10, 12 people in them. So I think and I think DM probably isn't thinking about that, probably isn't paying attention to that seasonal flow.
Steve?
Sure. I think you guys did a great job. Average flow is average, and clearly you took in peak flow also. I'm sure DEM knows that we have an influx of people. Also, a lot of our housing is empty all year, not just in the winter, but all year, which is why 5 people in some houses does not mean 5 people in every house. There's like 30% of our units are rentals, another 20% are, vacant or elderly. It's an average. Good job, guys. Let's keep it pushing here.
Next slide.
I don't think the URI population's growing.
So,
Not like you think it is.
in looking at your pump
Not by
stations,
20%.
Gentlemen?
there are some pump stations that need upgrades based on capacity. They need more, the pumps need to be larger. And then there are some pump stations identified that really just are in need of an upgrade due to aged equipment. And there's about 9-ish up there that need that upgrade. Some in the south, some in the north.
And with capacity upgrade, you're going to include equipment upgrade, I would.
Yes,
Hope.
yes,
Thank
yep, yeah, but it would be, larger pumps.
Yeah.
But, larger electrical service potentially, larger generator, standby generator, things like that. But the ones for just equipment upgrade, it would be sort of more, they just need to be updated, replaced
Retired.
at the same size they are.
Rupert?
So the resiliency plan talks about the number that need to be treated for prevent flood inflow. And I guess one question is, so what happens if they get flooded? What's the impact on the neighborhood or the community?
Well, so
Well, typically, when we look at a resiliency, we look at a couple different things. If the pump station's flooded, what is the collection area? Look at some of these things. If so the entire collections area would be under the flood zone, then we kind of look at it differently. But as part of the RIDEM is looking for any upgrades like this to meet those new flood standards and resiliency standards, 3 feet plus the base flood elevation is typically what we're looking at to protect it against whatever the base flood is. If it does get flooded, what you're looking at is, we see that in some pump stations. We look at the run times where the pump just keeps running for a period of time because it can't never draw down. It can't keep up with the inflow that's coming into it. So that we did see that in a couple stations that over some flows they could never catch up until the storm had surpassed or the sump pump stopped turned off, things like that. I think generally, unless it's really low, most of the ones have already been protected to the flood to some degree. But I think that we've included some of those requirements.
So that was the other question I had. So I looked at the resiliency plan, and it had details for each one for adding flood protection, and that wasn't consistently included in this plan, and I didn't know if there was decisions why to include it
I
or
think
when to
we
include
looked
it.
at the different stations based on their location and included some flood resiliency based on what we saw in there.
I guess the question is the reasons not to include it in all of them, I guess.
Well, is it the resiliency plan that is included in the appendices here? Okay, yeah, that's the draft plan, and it's that a lot of the implementation and the evaluation of what measures to include or what, cost benefit wise, what it doesn't make sense to do. Like we said, if the whole service area is flooded and the pump station is flooded, well, you've got time to come back, and there's going to be a different type of recovery for it, whereas if it's, well, the pump station's down the bottom of the hill and everybody up here is going to come back to their house after the evacuation order is lifted, and that one needs to be hardened a little better. So the resiliency plan is essentially incomplete. There is some additional information that's going to be in there. It's in as the draft format as it was initially submitted to DEM, but we've had comments back and we have to revise that as well. So there will be some other recommendations as to what to implement, but that hasn't been completed yet. Yeah. So again, these are kind of going along at a parallel track.
I can see people at home now looking, and do we have contingents to stop backflow if we ever get to a point where the pump station starts to get overwhelmed? So we mitigate what's going back into people's home. I mean, fluids is going to go where it's going to go. So, you know.
Well, generally it will come out the manhole before it comes out into somebody's house, but in lower lying areas, if you know, some houses have been equipped with a backflow, you know, a backwater valve, but some don't, you know, it's just a matter of whether hit or miss in terms of where they're out of town now. But again, it's a concern for the whole system. If you can't pump enough, if the pumps can't keep up, it's going to come out somewhere. If the pumps pump it and the treatment plant can't keep up, it's going to come out on the ground at Westmoreland or come out at Scarborough. You know, so those are the issues. And unfortunately, no matter what you do, you know, nothing can function much in excess of its design capacity. So that's what you're up against.
Thank you, guys.
Next slide. So the Scarborough treatment plant, this is the projected flows and loadings here, waste load. The annual average for your existing and future residential commercial needs is right around 1 MGD. The maximum month, 1.6 MGD. And then those peak flows on those wettest days, 3.4 MGD. And then this number BOD, is biochemical oxygen demand, and this has to do with the strength of the wastewater coming in. One piece of this that we looked at was the potential for providing wastewater service for the fishing industry at the Port of Galilee. We spoke with Town Dock and some of the other Seafreeze and reviewed sort of what their needs were to bring some of that fish processing back. Because right now they do a more limited fish processing. Any wastewater they collect, they truck elsewhere, and they've moved their processing facilities elsewhere in general. What you'll notice on this last column is the flow is pretty much the same. The real issue with the fishing industry is this one right here. It provides a much higher strength wastewater to the plant. So to design for that higher loading from the industry was one piece of this that we looked at. Next slide. So the alternatives we reviewed 3 alternatives. I'll step through them quickly. This is the existing oxidation ditch. One of the issues with it is there's not enough air to treat, there's not enough oxygen in the wastewater to meet the current or the future projected wastewater loads. So one option is to add more air. So we've got these jet aerators, is to add a few more. The other option we looked at to optimize your existing infrastructure is to, you'll notice there are 4 rings. The way this was designed was to use the inside 3 rings. You know, so the flow will come into the 3rd ring, into the 2nd, into the 1st. This outer ring is actually used for sludge storage. It's they call it an aerobic digester. So the wastewater that is through the process, the solids get pumped back here and they're stored. One option we looked at was to include this as additional treatment tank. And what that does is it essentially doubles the volume of this treatment. This outside ring is about the same as the inside 3. So that gives you additional treatment to That will give you treatment to meet your residential commercial needs, but it will not, doesn't provide enough treatment to meet the wastewater, or the wastewater needs of the port. Next slide. Oh, yeah. So the other item on here is this oxidation ditch. Typically, when we design wastewater systems, an oxidation ditch is, it functions similar to a pond, and the technical guidance on this is, you just need one. But what that doesn't do is this oxidation ditch was built in 1982. It's at or past its treatment capacity, and if this failed, there's no alternative. Typically, the way we design more traditional, conventional wastewater treatment was with multiple tanks so that you can take one offline for maintenance while the other two are operating, that sort of thing. This type of system doesn't have that, which is just an added level of risk for the town. Another alternative we looked at, we'll go through this one quickly, is adding primary settling tanks. So rather than going straight to the oxidation ditch, you would go from the influent pump station to primary settling tanks. This would remove about 30% of the solids before it gets to here. This performed similar to revamping the existing oxidation ditch for a lot more money. So we moved on. We can go to the next slide. And alternative 3 would be to replace the oxidation ditch with a conventional aerated activated sludge wastewater system. So this would be a treatment system similar, not exactly like, but similar to what's at the regional plant. What this does, the way this would work is from the influent pump station, rather than we would replace the oxidation ditch with aeration tanks. There would be 3 tanks. 2 would be required for the flow and wastewater needs generated by the town, and then an additional tank would allow capacity to serve the projected needs in the port. So these would be 3 aeration tanks, which would replace the oxidation ditch. 3 clarifiers would replace the 2 clarifiers, and then you would go to the chlorine contact tank and back out. This land is owned by the town. This building here would house the electrical equipment, the blowers. So rather than having those jet aerators on top, this system would have diffusers in the bottom of the tank, and the blowers in this building would send air through the bottom. These tanks are much deeper, and they just allow a much higher treatment capacity. And you can see the footprint here is almost the same as this, but it's just a much more efficient use of space in getting that treatment. Oh, yeah, this land is owned, I believe was once owned by the town, but was at some point became part of the development here.
So is this higher land, is it less susceptible to a coastal storm then?
So there would be options to do that. You could extend this berm, but then what we more typically do is where you're building the concrete tanks anyway, you would build those tanks to the elevation of the berm, so that the berm could potentially would be if needed would be extended, but that's unlikely. You would build those tanks to the elevation 20.
Well, essentially, it's all above gradient from there anyway. You see the lower part of the picture, the berm ends there, and that blends into, and all the other elevations are higher. So, but we would be required to build these structures higher to begin with too, because the backside is probably fallen into some other flood.
Excuse me, back to that berm, I'm a little slow here, but I asked you about it earlier, and I think you said it was built height of 17 feet?
I believe it was finished in 17 I think 2017, because all of the paperwork and documentation was completed, and map changes were done by the time I was here in 2019.
I didn't build anything along the ocean, but a fellow who's a very successful engineer built a little further north. And what he did was he researched what the surge was through all the great hurricanes. I believe he said it was, I think 38 was the worst. I believe it was 22 feet was the surge. And he built a 24 for that reason. And I know we discussed that here at this meeting, but we never talked about the height of the berm when it was constructed. But in any case, why, obviously it's going to protect against most storms, but that's 5 feet, 5 feet lower than the big one, and that, obviously they could do a heck of a lot of damage to the sewer treatment plant. In any case.
Next slide. So alternative 4, so this is kind of when you go to Panera Bread, you get to pick 2. You got to pick one of 1, 2, and 3, and then you got to pick one of 4 and 5. So this option is to handle the solids. So when you treat wastewater, you take solids out, and you need to do something with them. The 2 options are to thicken them and truck them away as liquid sludge. The other option is to dewater them and haul it away as what they call sludge cake or solids. So one gets hauled away in a tanker, one gets hauled away in a roll-off. Right now, the plant does sludge thickening. So a tanker truck would haul away liquid sludge. Right now, that gets disposed at the incinerator in Woonsocket. Sludge disposal is one of the biggest regional problems facing the wastewater industry. And on top of that, the Woonsocket, the current disposal facility, they're planning to no longer accept liquid sludge. They will, in the future, they're planning to only accept sludge cake. One option here is to continue to do sludge thickening. It would be replacing the gravity belt thickener with 2 units, one next to the other. This building was originally designed to have space for 2, and that would provide the redundancy you need. We can go to the next slide just to see the other option. The other option would be to do sludge dewatering. A screw press is one technology that does that. The liquid goes in and gets squeezed until what you're getting out is dewatered biosolids. And then there would be some equipment to handle that. Rather than handling a liquid, you're now handling a solid, and there'd be some conveyors, et cetera, to put that into its disposal container. Given the state of the disposal options, thickening is a little bit more expensive, but would give the town more security going forward in their disposal needs.
Question. The ongoing cost of hauling, it sounds like traditional sludge is really going away as far as finding places, receptors to take it to, or at least you're minimizing where you can go.
Yes, there are more options. Yes, there are more options for the solids.
Right. So you're either hauling further distances, or the few that are left in the market are charging more, or both.
Sure.
So my question then becomes, and you're not going to totally offset your cost, but the cost to haul and dispose of the dewatered sludge versus the investment, can you get 10% return on that investment, or?
I don't have the numbers on that off the top of my head.
But it should be something that should be considered.
Yes, and in addition, when you're hauling solid sludge cake, the number of trucks you need is significantly less.
Yeah.
So your transportation costs will plummet.
Okay. Thank you.
Next slide. So this summarizes sort of the needs at the plant. One thing I didn't mention is, we'll just go through this quick. The oxidation ditch would be repurposed as sludge storage and anaerobic sludge digester. This would be your new treatment plant. The old secondary clarifiers could also be additional sludge storage if needed. And when I say sludge, this is before you've thickened or dewatered it. But then the one thing that I didn't mention at the beginning is, in addition to the needs to meet the new flows, there's a whole bunch of what we call baseline improvements that just need to be done for the age of the equipment, the condition of the equipment. Wastewater plants are a harsh operating environment for mechanical equipment. So the influent pump station, the disinfection system, that stuff is all going to need attention in the next 20-year planning period.
So, question in the comp plan, and this is sort of, seems out of context, but it's in the comp plan. Evaluate the feasibility of reusing gray water from the Scarborough wastewater treatment facilities. Is there feasibility of reusing it, or is that part of the?
I don't know, I'm not sure if they looked at it how carefully, but the only feasible location, I think, would be the country club, Point Judith. Any other places is really not the ability, to land apply the effluent. You really have to, I don't know, we would probably need to improve or increase the treatment quality on the effluent.
Like, for example, Jamestown treatment plant, they take their water and they do the gray water and they run it through a process before they send it over to the golf course over there. So that would have to be added. That would be in addition to any improvements that have been noted here. And then trying to locate that equipment would be, we'd have to do that as well.
Yeah, maybe the comp plan, maybe we got it from Jamestown. I don't know, Doc will remember.
And they only do a portion of what they have, whatever they do. So.
Just curious, and I'm not looking for hard numbers, but theoretically, is that huge numbers to do something like that? To create that capacity?
For the
Gray water?
Yeah. I'm just thinking about reducing the disposal and getting a benefit for both, the community and for the operation of the facility. And I don't, obviously if it's huge dollars, but if it's small, and if you don't have an answer, just say you don't have an answer. I'm not.
I don't know. I know the technology that we would use would be maybe some type of disc filter that we've used. That's what they have over in Jamestown, a cloth disc filter, which can get out much of that. There'll be some residuals that you would have to still treat. As far as the cost to input the original equipment manufacturers, that and then any pipelines and things to get it over to the golf course. What kind of payback you get, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to be looking at more than just a monetary payback, I think, when you look at that equation.
Yeah.
One of the other benefits of your plant is you do have an ocean discharge point, which the treatment levels required for an ocean discharge are less than rivers or groundwater discharge. When you have a groundwater discharge, you're putting into the ground, then limiting that flow is a much more economic benefit. With an ocean outfall, there's probably nothing cheaper than putting the clean treated water back to Rhode Island Sound.
So a question that like 90 million people have asked me to ask you is our pipe going out into the ocean far enough out? People are convinced that it comes back into Scarborough Beach. So.
Yes?
Yeah, thank you. Just thank you.
How far out does it go? A couple hundred feet?
It's about 2,200 feet.
2,200 feet?
Yeah, the groin that extends out, the rock jetty that's out there is about 600 feet from the coast, and it extends out another 1,400, I believe.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So it's about half a mile.
Yeah, and that was put out to, based on the mixing and to have it stay out there and so it mixes enough before it does make its way back. Because eventually the tide does come in, but it is all mixed and calculated out.
Diluted.
Just two quick follow-ups, Mark. I think the level of treatment had to be to a higher level because the water was used for industrially, but Yukon built a 1 million-gallon reclaimed water facility in 2008 at $25 million.
Okay.
Okay. And then I was interested in one thing in the report that you all did, the report that came from, I'm not sure if it was ours or the regional treatment plant, but the discharge for the regional plant is off of behind Monahan's, and it's about 12 or 1,300 feet, as I understand what I read. There's something about the water being tested in terms of its dispersion, as I understood it, at the University of Rhode Island's Bay Campus location. Have you seen that in that permit, and do you know what that's about? What I took away is that you're required to test.
That may be the bioassay testing and the
Right,
toxicity testing. Yeah, that's to see how many fish you kill with your effluent. And what the Bay Campus water is I believe that's where we go and can grab the seawater samples to mix it with for dilution water and stuff, because when they run the test, they run you'll start out with full strength effluent, and then you cut it down to see for your permit requirements, because I forget, it's the L50 and the percentages of where your break point is. You have to be, you can't be more toxic than it'll kill certain fish at a certain level of dilution. So the Bay Campus is, we go down to the dock and collect the dilution water there. So then,
But that's where you're required to grab the samples.
Yes, I think they have some other. Well, we don't pull samples. We're not pulling the effluent samples. Yeah, the effluent samples will come straight off the end of the disinfection tank.
But you're pulling samples at the Bay Campus to test for how much effluent is in the water.
No.
So you're using the
No.
Bay Campus water to back into your dilution rate?
Yeah, that's to use as a representative for seawater for the dilution rate. And they have some other allowances to use other water, but I think they were supposed to pull those samples and send that off to the lab, and the lab does all the
And I'm
testing.
assuming they picked the Bay Campus because it's accessible, but it's also far enough away so it's not going to be influenced by the existing plants.
Yeah, I'm not sure what went behind it, other than it's on, Rhode Island Sound, and it's representative of the seawater.
Thanks.
I'll tell you right now, it's a great place to pull it, because it's definitely dirtier than the water down here. It's up in the bay. You got all the Providence River dumping in there. You got everybody up the bay coming right there. So that's a good place to grab it from.
Steve, averages are averages.
Okay, now back to our regional plan. So your forecasted future needs at the regional plant. So let's see. So for your existing flow, here it is. Your annual average right now is 1.14. The minimum, this is the number you asked me for before, 0.75, and the maximum monthly average, 1.67. If we can convert on-site wastewater treatment systems to sewer, and we do the planned developments, typical, vacant lot houses, that sort of stuff, we are going to get to a 1.5 million gallons per day annual average to the regional plant, 2.2 maximum month average, and 1 million gallons per day at the minimum.
And that's just Narragansett's contribution to the plant?
This is just Narragansett's contribution to the plant. So your allotment right now is 1.22, your owned allotment, and based on the annual average, you need to get to 1.5, but that's going to leave you over certain months, so really what you want to design for is 2.2. And I would just point out that this number really should not be here. This number is based on the 1.5. We really should be designing for the 2.2. So you need about 1 million gallons in round numbers.
Let me ask a question that I'm sure people are asking at home is, okay, we're planning for this for Narragansett. We take, and the assumption, I guess, would be that South Kingstown is doing the same study or will be doing the same study.
They are, yes.
Is there a communication at some point in time with both parties to say, this is what the new plant needs to look like, or the new upgrades need to look like?
Yeah, that communication will occur. In fact, when we complete this exercise and we have, like we mentioned, we have comments from DEM, we're going to update our plan and submit that back to DEM, and we'll get that off to South Kingstown to my counterpart over there, so they can get a look at our plan to see where it's at. And then, ultimately, that's what their facilities plan will do. We'll come up, okay, what these upgrades need to be. We did not evaluate the loadings to the extent that they did for the seafood processing, obviously, or for the existing conditions. That's what the SK would handle.
Yeah, they'd
that
have the
portion of it.
data on that.
And again, we will have to pay some portion of that through our operating costs, because it's just a normal cost of doing business there. But their plan will evaluate it, and there'll be a back and forth on that. And again, between the planning technically and the legal agreements will need to be kind of revisited and fine-tuned to make sure everybody's all in the same place. Because ultimately, URI is going to maybe actually be looking for more capacity than what they have now already too, just to be able to stay.
Well, that was
under
going
the
to be
thresholds.
my follow-up question is, they're doing their master plan over, comprehensive plan. Are they is this part of that plan? Do you know?
Is our plan part of URI's?
No, are they also looking at the waste side of things in their strategic plan, or are they is it a growth plan?
URI, I think all they would be looking at is just what the volumes of flow
Gotcha.
and the loadings, if they have anything, but mostly just generation and pumping capacity, because they don't have any treatment themselves they own. I know that South Kingstown has just been through some upgrades for the pump stations that convey the flow from URI up. So if those would have had to be in accordance with they would have been in accordance with the current facilities plan, which is 20 years old, 30 years old. But URI would be looking at I think, just raw capacity at this point, unless they have some special lab waste or anything like that. I know they did construct a PFAS drinking water PFAS treatment facility, and that's online already. The PFAS is there, but they're going to provide some additional filtration sand filters for it to treat the iron and manganese in the water, and that's a backflush that's going to come. So that's an additional flow that isn't included in this original projections for them. Okay. I'm not sure what the flow. I can't imagine it'll be extremely high levels of flow, but it will be an additional flow to the treatment plant.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you.
So the two alternatives for addressing capacity would be in the short term, lease or negotiate a lease, and obviously would be an expansion at the regional plant. And as we mentioned, the regional partners would be involved in that, and their planning efforts would all have to come together in sort of what would eventually be the facilities plan for that regional wastewater facility. So our projections would go into that, South Kingstown's projections and URI's projections, and then based on the need and the intermunicipal agreement negotiations, however that works, there would be capital costs to do that upgrade at some point.
So URI hits that plant in two ways. It hits it from Kingston and it hits it from the Bay campus. URI is just about finished a master planning process for the main campus in Kingston and the Bay campus as well. Have you guys seen it? And what is it in terms of what its potential effect is with respect to, particularly with respect to the Bay campus in terms of both demand and the quality of the waste of the water that's hitting the plant?
I have not seen it.
Okay.
The waste, so I guess if there's additional wastewater.
So let me ask you a quick question. Do you know, do they have any pretreatment up there? Do they have any wet labs, for example, that they're doing research on that campus?
I don't know the answer to that.
Do you know, John?
They don't have any heavy industrial waste coming out of there. If they have any proposals for that, they'll have to go through the pretreatment program and update their permits. I believe it's all strictly domestic waste that's coming from the facility. I'd have to double check and confirm that, but they're not. I don't believe they have an industrial permit.
Okay. Just big picture-wise, at a conceptual level, their master plan for the Bay campus headlines: develop new classroom facilities, expand research and applied learning, provide short-term housing, do industry partnerships and innovation space in terms of incubator space. And they're located about a dozen opportunity sites there. So just in terms of, and then the master plan for the main campus really focused on housing and essentially the upgrade to housing that needs to happen, especially with the old dorms like Butterfield and the rest of it. So to the extent that it matters for the planning process, and I don't know whether that comes together when you guys work on the regional plan or not, but be cognizant they've got significant plans. There's a difference between plan and execution, I understand that, but be aware that that's going on.
Thank you. Next slide. Next slide. All right. So,
Can we
Hold
go
on.
back just
Dr.
a,
O'Neill?
yeah, can we go back just a second? It's
Oh, yeah.
a little practical question. The chair always talks about people at home. But I don't know about you people, but I drive up and down South Pier Road regularly, and it wasn't too far after the plant was put in. Horrible odors were there from time to time. Steve, his father developed beautiful development right next to the plant. I thought at that time, how are these people going to put up with it? In any case, I still go by that South Pier Road, high school, et cetera, regularly. No odor. What can you explain? What is the difference? It's the same plant, and we're obviously using it more. But I know it's sort of a practical question, maybe out of order here, but odor is odor, you know.
Is the question, why does it smell sometimes and not other times?
We don't. Yeah, I mean, well, maybe I'm missing it, but I go up and down South Pier Road every day. So, but I remember.
So we do consider odor control in designs. So there are different technologies, you know, depending on the treatment process, where you would treat the air for odors before as you circulate air in the building to get rid of the waste, the hydrogen sulfide in the air.
Yeah.
You need to do that to maintain work, spaces for people to work. You need to maintain equipment. As that air comes out, it's generally, it's often treated depending on the process in that building. So air scrubbers or activated carbon canisters will treat that air. Sometimes what you smell is oftentimes when the weather changes, the biological process will change, and sometimes you do get an odor from that, just seasonally. And that's just, the same way you would at a pond or something like that, or a marsh when the weather changes.
I'm getting older. I figure maybe my sense of smell is less accurate. But boy, it used to.
And,
No, really, it used to stink. Back when Steve, you know that development your dad put in, beautiful homes right next to that plant. I thought, whoa, these poor people. In any case, that's a little aside.
All right, next slide. So now we will look at the recommended plan. So, just some cost estimates here. The sewer expansions identified, just over $100 million. The pump station upgrades over the 20-year period, around $250,000, and the improvements at the Scarborough wastewater treatment facility, which is essentially a whole new plant, is $75 million. The pump station's $24 million.
Not a quarter.
$250 million. I'm sorry. I misspoke.
It doesn't matter. Our town
Sorry.
manager just had a heart attack anyways.
Yeah, that deal expired. And, so that's, this is just the plant again. We've been through sort of the whole system. The next slide has Ryan and myself's contact information. if there's any, oh, no, it doesn't. So here's a, here's a summary. I think we've sort of been through it.
Typical
You've
consultants,
got
by the
a whole
way.
bunch of needs at the collection system level. Infiltration, inflow, you want to plan for your development. And we have the goal to remove some of these on-site septic systems. The pump stations have capacity and age-related issues. The Scarborough treatment plant, there's some economic development incentive to expand that plant and to bring some business back to the port. And then there's all the age-related equipment needs. And then finally, at the regional plant, we've sort of identified the wastewater planning level, and the next steps there will be the regional planning with your regional partners. Now I think there we go. There's the contact info.
Now, the piece that is not here, that I always scream about, and this is the biggest piece, so it's the elephant in the room, but the reality is, if you can't get the effluent there, we have sewer pipes that are 40 years old. I mean, those aren't 8-inch pipes anymore. You just look at the sludge buildup on a sewer pipe, and that's not even figured in here, of upgrading our sewer pipes, or even coming through and regenerating them or something. That's not part of this.
We did not include any
Right.
rehab of.
I just want to clarify for people
Yep,
what the scope of the work actually was.
Yep, and we were looking at basically the capacity of the pipe. So the existing pipes in there, we looked at them if they needed to be, if they could handle the additional flows that we're projecting, and the pump stations as well. We did not include any costs for addressing II at this point, or any identified
Right.
sewer collapses.
No, I didn't expect
There's
you-
nothing like,
I knew that-
generally, I mean, the sewer pipes we're looking at, like, I don't know, like 80 years for a lifetime for a lot of these pipes. So, I mean, there is some life still left in a lot of the infrastructure.
Yeah, structurally, they'll last
Yes.
long. The flow capacity diminishes over time, so.
It
And there's
does,
processes-
but at times you get flushing flows
Right,
that will
there's
clean it out over
opportunities, and
time.
there's also processes to do
Yep.
that. But we don't think about that. It's never mentioned, it's never discussed. And I know it wasn't part of your scope of the work, but I just want to keep that in front of people, because, we look at this, but you got to get it from somebody's house to here, and we always tend to just overlook it. I just think it's because this is so big, but we have miles of pipe, and I think the going rate right now is what, about $300 of linear foot?
It can get, depending
Yeah.
if you got to do the paving and
Yeah,
where it is in Middle
so-
Street, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but even conservatively, you're talking 250.
Yep.
So, yeah, I just think it's something we need to, and you and I are on the same page of this, because we've talked about it many, many times, but we focus on the plants, and I get it, they're the big beasts, but we tend to forget that it's the little thing that breaks the back.
Yeah, I mean, what we'll see is over time, roots and grease and other items that can cause blockages in the sewers. But that's where we go to the sewer rehab and do lining to address the I&I and structural repairs on an as-needed basis.
Yep. So, any other questions on?
So one of the things seems missing to me in the plan is a priorities list. And, I mean, there's a whole laundry list of here's things that need to happen. And as Tom pointed out, the sewer area extensions that are in the plan are the same ones that were in the plan 20 years ago. So I think sort of identifying what's most important issues and to me, sort of maintaining existing facility capacity would be number one, and it seems like number two would be adding flood resiliency. So the other thing I would ask is sort of look at the Appendix C and make sure it corresponds with what's in the full plan. And I gather that both of them are in draft and moving back and forth, but there's a little bit of inconsistency, and it would be good to have at least priorities for the flood resiliency of the pump stations.
And if I could pony on your question, in the upgrades, if we go back to what you're proposing, which makes sense, can these not only be prioritized, but can these be brought online incrementally so that you're not biting off the whole chunk at once, or does that not make any sense? I'm just looking if you can do phased development, so you can spread the cost over and still increase the efficiency of the plant, or is this one of those things where you just got to rip the Band-Aid off?
As far as the Scarborough treatment plant?
Yeah, because we own that one ourselves.
Yeah, so, well, you would want to do the secondary treatment system, the aeration tanks and the
Yep.
secondary clarifiers as one project. You know, you could phase it, you know, improvements to other areas in the plant could be phased as separate projects to be able to spread that, you know, that cost out.
So if you did the aerator system, the new system as one, so the old system, would it make sense at the same time to convert that to a sludge storage, or that can wait?
Yeah, well, yes, you could. Yep, you could do that all at once, or,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, I was just wondering if there's, you know, I know Steve could write a check for this tomorrow, but the rest of us we're looking at this going, holy cow. And I'm just wondering, is there ways to do this in a phased development that makes sense? If it doesn't make sense, then please tell us, and it's just something you got to grin and bear with.
I would say some of it, like the aeration tanks and all the infrastructure, you're out there, you're building the concrete and making the extra tanks, you probably want to go and do that portion all at once. And Rydom is actually, we actually initially put in a phased approach to two tanks, and then you could do a third tank in the future. They said that's not something that they would be able to approve.
Okay.
There might be some more negotiation or discussions on that if that was something. But seeing as we're projecting flows, you know, over a 20-year period, obviously you have to have some infrastructure to accept any NOR flows right now. We're
Yeah.
already, you know,
We're-
at max day, you know, last several years during around 4th of July weekend, the plant is hitting its max. It's really there's really no safety factor on that. It's at risk. And they've had to chlorinate more to account for that. Over time, as we do see we get more flows, we'll get more sludge generation, and that's something that might have to be looked at to see when that needs, if you broke up the liquid upgrades and then the sludge upgrades, there would be some point where you would have to start doing the solids upgrades. You know, that could probably be phased because, you know, you do the treatment plant, then you have to do your growth in your industry, or you allow the fish industry in, but, you know, there'd have to be some thought into how that phasing went along.
Right.
But there would be some availability to do that.
An important thing, because we're not alarmist people, and we try not to do that. There might be some people at home going, oh my God, it's going to, you know, come back into my house tomorrow. On a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, what kind of concern level should we be at this point in time?
For Scarborough, right now you're at, I mean, nothing at the homeowner's side. It's nothing.
Right,
coming
no,
back.
but I'm
It's
just-
still,
yeah.
as far
I just
as-
wanna
think
close
it just
it.
limits what you can do going forward.
Right.
Until you take care of, you know, the infrastructure and your treatment plant, it's really not much more growth that can occur.
Okay.
And still, mainly because of that peak day.
Gotcha. Okay. Last one from me. The regional plant and Scarborough are separate issues and can be separate from each other and do not have to be done in conjunction.
I would
All right. Is there any economics advantages to doing them at the same time?
The only economic advantage would be is if we would enter some sort of a joint contract or a joint bid with South Kingstown to have both performed at the same time under the same contract.
Okay.
And you would have, you know, that type of contractor on board to do it. But, you know, the economies of scale there, I'm not sure how much, you know, it's not like you're on the same site.
Right.
And sometimes adding two pieces like that would complicate it to the extent that it would make it more difficult. So you'd have to come up with, you know, milestone changes and the like.
Okay.
So it might even, you know, I'm not sure. There's not a whole, you know,
Not a lot
there's a
of
few more
overlap.
players in the pool.
We don't want to
here now, right?
complicate it, I just would, wonder.
Maybe not at the treatment plants, but I think at pump stations,
Yeah.
if we were doing a resiliency upgrade, you might look at, north and south don't mean as much at that point as far
Okay.
as where it discharges, but as far as that goes, there might be some, just opportunity
Yeah,
to
and to
mirror a couple projects together to make it more.
Yeah.
And the modern technology that's put in place, the operating savings over time, going to be decent, or is it about the same rate we're going at, or?
I mean, we've been putting in premium efficiency motors and things like that for over the last couple of years. So, I mean, I think a lot of your facilities we've seen, they're not original, they've
Right.
been upgraded over time. So, how much if there's a big savings for that, I'm not really sure. I wouldn't think.
Whoever's got,
Based on how
somebody
often
have,
those pumps
excuse me, if
operate.
somebody has a phone with the volume on, could you turn it off, please?
It's a bird out there.
Oh, it's the birds? Thanks. I got good hearing, I don't have directional hearing, so, thanks. All right, thank you, guys. Doc, anything?
Oh, wait, you're going to ask the public, right?
Yeah.
Discuss, okay, yep.
Rupert?
Yeah, just another request, sort of related to the issue of Narragansett's halftime. Ask DEM about sort of projecting flows for summer and thinking about that in the design, because I think that's unique, and I don't know if there's alternatives for handling. So at this town where we're doing this expansion of the football stadium, they basically, the easy solution, the most cost-effective solution was put in a holding tank for halftime, but we're talking 2 months here, so a holding tank doesn't work so well.
One thing I will say is we use the same peaking factors that you have for your residential users. So that, all the same peaking factors are used from what you have now to your peak flows. We use that to project, future flows to that as well. So that is accounted for in that.
Yeah, and they use the operating data and the actual flow, so we know, those are built in and baked into the numbers, like you said, and the figures they had up there with the minimum month and the maximum month, those are in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, they go in and find a max day, but, that's, again, you just got to make sure that you're not flowing, you're still flowing in, not flowing out.
Yeah, and we
not
look
flowing-
at the last 3 years of data,
So
so it's relatively new.
Projecting future flows in the summer based on growth with existing. Yep, makes sense. Thanks.
Tom?
So basically, looking at this, it says that we'll be doing pretty much what we're doing for the next 20 years. So I'm wondering, as you look out in your profession over time, is there something on the horizon that is, either from a technology point of view or something like that, that's fundamentally different than this thing, and is going to change things over time? Or is this pretty much it for as far as you can see?
I think this is, we based on what we look at for various alternatives, we went with what we feel is the most tried, proven technology that kind of goes out there. Are there other technologies? Yes. Are they cost effective and as reliable? I mean, some of that's debatable. But I think we have this activated sludge, putting in selector zones that allow us to grow the bugs that we really want to treat this wastewater. I think that's been incorporated into this design.
Thanks, good question. Steve?
I've got two. I'm probably a little late, but number one, do we know how many of the sewer expansion projects were done in the last 20 years? I know we talked about how it looks like the same list. I'm just wondering if, was it like one or two?
Of the major ones in the original document, it would probably be just Briggs Farm was the major one, but with some of the changes that were adopted, there have been smaller extensions. I know up in Bonnet, the beach club has come on. There was one project within the last 10 or 12 years that brought on, say, 20 or 30 houses. It was just a matter of, but that was because the house was all the way out on a point and it had to go past 20 or 30 houses to get there. So, and there's been a handful of smaller projects with a couple, 4, 5, 6 houses here, and then just your regular extensions. But off the top of my head, I think Briggs is the only one that was a major project that was done in our facilities plan. Back to the '94, the regional plan. I believe we were still doing some of the, our 90s sewer expansion in the north end, and some of those were replacements, but some of that was expansion.
All right, great. I'm in favor of sewer expansion, by the way. I think it's great to hear that DEM is now in favor of sewer expansion in the SAMP area. I think you said you talked to them about that. Because when I last spoke to them, and part of their whole SAMP thing is they want to recharge the groundwater there. So that was a reason that they turned down sewer extensions in that area. So if they're in favor of that, I like that. I'm just wondering, and obviously that 104 millions over the next 20 years, we can pop those in here and there. My second question, actually, you want to respond to that? You look like you're ready.
I just want to, that was a phone call with the DEM regulator.
Okay.
So I would just,
It's not their
I would
official
just be
position.
careful
Yeah, okay.
that we're
hasn't talked
talking
to a
about, make sure we're
higher
talking
authority.
apples to apples in the same area kind of thing, that's all.
Yep, all right, yeah, that's because I know like half of those projects are in the, the SAMP area, and they
I
don't
think some of
really
those
want you going
limitations
that
are
way.
CRMC limitations.
Yes,
too.
yeah, they
That's
are,
the
yeah.
issue, and we know
He's a
those
new
types of
dad.
things.
He's looking for hope anywhere right now.
Anywhere I can find it. But my other question
Congratulations.
was on the treatment system alternatives. You skipped alternative 2 because it doesn't make sense. It's just more expensive. It doesn't do anything for us. That makes sense. The difference between alternative 1 and alternative 3 looks like about $27 million, and the primary choice, the reason to choose that over alternative 1 seems to be to bring more efficient capacity back to the point. I'm in favor of that. Do you think we could get the state of Rhode Island to help shoulder that burden? They're very in charge of that area.
I can't speak for the state of Rhode Island. I know in other communities, we have done projects similar to this with, economic development funds. So there are avenues to do that.
Excellent.
I'm not a planner or a grant writer, but, we see that news. We have funding people at our company, and I've worked with communities throughout New England who have done just that type of thing.
Awesome.
And I neglected at the beginning to say that this project that they're working on is funded by an economic development grant, so it's at no cost to the town. And the idea of that is it's a design or planning grant that would bring, once we get the planning document approved, then we can go for other ED grants to be able to fund the expansion. The challenge with that is as he showed, the numbers and the volume of flow to get to the economic development portion are not much, but, again, you got to be creative in your grant writing and your application process.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because the state holds most of that land as leased land, and, so, if we're going to treat their, heavy water coming up, then maybe they should help out, so.
Staff, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. It's pretty thorough. I just want to point out to the board, Mr. Chairman, that if you're inclined to make a recommendation this evening, that the information that you saw in the PowerPoint is different and more updated than the plan that you have.
Yeah.
So if you're inclined to do that this evening, to just make a note of that when you make a recommendation.
Thank you. Anybody from the public like to speak on this or have any questions? No? Thank you. Thank you. All right. So are we looking for an expert, and I'm saying this rhetorically, but what did you expect out of this evening, the staff? You want to recommend, are we looking at a recommendation? Can we come back later?
So I believe that the town engineer is looking for a recommendation from this board to the town council. I'm sure that they prefer a recommendation of support and approval for the
Yep.
plan. You do have, we weren't sure how many, if it was going to take longer than one evening. So we did previously poll this board to see if you wanted to come back on, I believe it's July 22nd. I think it was, well, at that point, there will be a revised draft of the plan. Is that correct? So if you wanted to see a revised draft of the plan with all of this information incorporated, you could do that. It's your prerogative.
Okay. I'm going to leave it to the board. I'm going to poll you. Do you want to make a recommendation this evening? You want to wait until revised plan? How you feeling, Steve?
What's the hurry?
So the revised plan would just be the extra information that was up there, but not in our packet, is that correct? Yeah, that, I'm satisfied. I could make a recommendation tonight.
Tom?
I could make a recommendation this evening affirmatively to support the document. I do think it's important that the cover memo that goes to the board, excuse me, goes to the council, has language that reflects some of the major points that we talked about tonight, particularly with respect to URI, and I'm sure there's other stuff as well. But I think just simply a yes or no tonight would not be sufficient in terms of what we ought to be thinking through and recommending here.
Rupert?
So adding to what Tom just said, I think there's some other points that we probably should discuss and bring to our advice to the council. Issues such as budgeting.
All right. Doc?
No, I agree. What's the hurry tonight? Yeah.
All right. So you want to defer and come back on the 22nd? And look at it that way? Staff, you okay with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And
Are you guys okay with that?
That's fine. Like I said, I would appreciate the additional guidance and particularly the negotiation information with URI. I just I would not be available at the meeting next week. So, and I don't believe these guys, like I said, I think most of the plan is in place. We'll have that before that meeting as well, so we can get you the revised plan so you have that in your hands. And then, if you've got any other additional questions that come to your head, you can forward them to me or to Jill, and we can try and address those if you've got any other questions between now and then.
If you have any specific recommendations, please send them to staff. You don't have to go through me, just send it to them so we get it efficient as to what you would like. Okay? Is that good with you, Jill?
Oh, that's fine with me. I was going to ask that, yeah, you can, do not,
Yeah, I don't want to delay it.
reply all. But if you do have any commentary, I'll put it together,
Yeah,
and
you
then you
cannot
can
reply
review
all.
it.
It's
You
just
can
goes
review
to
it
Jill.
next Monday, and then you can vote
Great.
at that time. Like I said, Mr. Gerhardt, I don't believe, or neither will Andrew nor Ryan be here as well. So
Okay.
it'll be us.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. All right.
I'm sorry, one more time, Mr. Killian? I believe it's Tuesday. I think Monday is our council meeting.
Yeah. If you could get that out, all of us, so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'll send out
22nd
the
is
meeting
a
request.
Tuesday.
I did poll you,
Yeah.
or Heidi did a couple, maybe 3 weeks ago or so, but,
Yeah.
yep, well, as soon as we secure the room, we'll send it to you, maybe this room again.
And are we still meeting with the town council on the 28th?
We are not, that's the 6th, and it's further on your
It's gonna be the
agenda.
6th, Yeah, I thought so. Okay, I just want to double check for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
You said the 28th? I thought it was the
We
6th.
had down tentatively to have a work session with the town council on the 28th. It's going to be August 6th.
6th,
Okay?
okay, yeah.
I just want to make
No,
sure
no,
everybody's
that's
on the same
good.
page. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank these folks for all the work they put
Yeah.
in the plan and for being here tonight.
Yeah, on behalf of all of us, thank you for your patience, but thank you for the thoroughness of the report, and thank you for relaying in the information so lay people can understand that. And I think that's the biggest thing is if we have an informed community, they may not like these figures, but at least they understand what, where, and why. And I think that's the most important thing. So with that, do we have any
Thank you for having
business? We have to do minutes. Okay. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Appreciate the public. Yeah. Hold on. Do I need a motion for a 5-minute break?
So moved if you need one.
Seconded? Moved
No
and seconded by the
discussion.
choir. 5 minutes. It's back. We go? All right, we are live. We are back, a continuation of the July 15th Planning Board meeting. Chairman announcements, the only thing I had announced was we have a work session coming up with the town council, which we're going to go over. The other thing is...
Again, that's the one on the 6th, right?
Yeah.
August.
And then during a training session I had with statewide planning, they had a number of lawyers there, and we were going over legislation and procedures and things. Two things came out, a couple things came out. One was I had questions about the no less than 5, no less than 1, 5, and the lawyers for the state kept saying, no, it's 1 per bedroom. And I said, well, you've got to read the law. And they were like, oh, you're right. And there were a couple of other ones. But the big significant thing was that the judge that is now overseeing the land court is doing it very enthusiastic. He's got some expertise and really delves into things. But he spoke about his respect for planning boards and zoning boards, but cited that some communities, not all, but some communities need to really firm up their recommendations on a legal language. And we've always worked it that way, but I didn't know if we could maybe put a work session together with our council to talk about, even while we talk about or interview somebody on what they want to do, sometimes it comes out where, oh, that seems like a lot, or a little, and really more, how do we define a degree of a variance that, you know, it's too much or not enough. Okay, can we tighten things up? Can we make our language better and tighter than we already do? And if we can do something there, that would be great. And that's all I had. Wastewater facility plan?
You don't want the 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack language anymore, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I compliment all of you because, no, I compliment all of you because we really do strive to address it as a legal type of thing, but I don't know, you can always improve it. We need to approve minutes of June 17th. Would you like us to do that, Ryan? Yes. Rupert?
Mr. Chairman. So I think the minutes of June 17 are good, except I would like to add an expansion on under B3 for Cherry, the motion about the town's comprehensive plan. I think it's important to add the details that about the aspects of the components, the sections of the comprehensive plan that were stated that it's not consistent with to the minutes.
Absolutely, Mr. Friday. Would you like us to put that in and then bring the minutes back to you next month?
I trust you can put them, I mean, I think I gave section numbers and stuff.
You
I
did.
think we can just
Sure.
trust that you'll put them in and move the minutes with those, with that revision. Actually, not a revision, but elaboration.
Yeah.
Jill, you're trustworthy.
I think, do we all trust her? I just had a question. I was not here, obviously, I was away, but were the specifics in a recommendation that went to zoning, were the rationale behind that vote very specific in that recommendation?
Yeah, absolutely. They were written
Okay,
in.
terrific. I assume that. Okay.
But, yeah, they will be.
Anybody else have anything on the minutes?
Yeah, I just one quick one. Jill, while you're looking at B3, in the third paragraph, in the description of the amount of floor area ratio relief that was needed, consider adding the word substantial amount of floor area ratio relief that was needed.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
With those changes, I move the minutes.
Okay. Do I have a second? Second. Okay. I am going to recuse myself from this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Um,
I'm going to do the same, Mark, because I also wasn't here.
Okay.
And I haven't seen the minutes.
Okay. So you got Steve and myself as abstaining? Okay.
Bear with
2025,
me, I'm not as fast as Heidi.
2025 legislative updates. Staff?
Yep, 1 second here.
No problem. Just trying to
Alrighty,
move
thank
things
you.
along before
Yes,
somebody
absolutely.
passes out from the heat.
Understood. The 2025 legislative updates. So I provided to you earlier, you should have received it at your chair, the APA Legislative Committee Housing and Land Use Legislation 2025, sort of their synopsis of the bills that passed and the bills that didn't. I also provided you a copy of the League of Cities and Towns 2025 report of all of the, summarizing everything that occurred. I don't really want to go through all of that. I did also put out a request to our legal folks to give us a synopsis on their interpretation of what this means and how it's going to affect our zoning ordinance, as well as our subdivision regulations and frankly, the procedures in which we operate in other realms as well. I have not received that yet, so we can verbally, if you like, go through what we have to date, what Ryan and I put together about 5 hours ago, that cuts through essentially the top 9 bills and what the changes are. But I would defer anything in writing until we have had legal's review of it.
Do you want to wait until we have both staff and legal? Steve, your comments?
Yeah, I'd like to wait.
Yeah. Tom? Rupert?
It would be great to have legal at least brief us on House Bill 5794B. I was on a conference call today with a bunch of planners around the state, and attorneys, and there's a lot of uncertainty about what that bill says.
Okay. Doc? Sure. Yeah, I feel the same way. So if we can continue this and let legal know that the sooner we can get it, the better, we'd be happy. We appreciate that. Town Council work session with Planning Board scheduled for August 6th.
So, yep, so you have a work session scheduled right now with the town council, and it is slated to cover 3 topics, of which you would recall that were part of the 14 amendments. I believe Heidi reached out to you earlier this week to ask if you still have your books. And if you don't, and she also listed out the sections that I believe they want to talk about. We have not received anything in writing from them, but they did at their council meeting specifically mention they wanted to talk about the coastal freshwater wetlands overlay. They wanted to talk about the 15% modification for dimensional regulations, and they wanted to talk about the definition of household. I would just want to point out earlier, there was some confusion about the definition of a household. The town council has actually already approved a definition of household. They did that, their second reading was earlier last month. So there is a new definition on the book, which reflects the definition, the recommendation that you folks made in July and again in December, which is the no greater than 1 person per bedroom up to 5.
Yeah. So they passed that a couple of weeks ago. They want to revisit it. I don't know why, but they'll explain to us. So it's a work session, so it should be give and take. And I asked them at their last meeting if they could send us any and all information to give us what their vision is or what their thoughts were, and they felt that that's what the meeting was for. So it's an opportunity for us to hear them and what they are, and then address their needs as best we can. Okay? All right. Urban renewal plan.
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like public comment because I don't care. The idea of going to a meeting with questions going to be asked and like definitions or whatever, with no advance, give you something to work on, to look up, talk about, Google, I don't know. But to walk in cold, to sit here, and what are your thoughts? Well, it's in how many minutes do you want this, sir? Again, I just find that I don't think it's very productive. That's me.
Okay. Thank you. Tom?
This will be the second one of these that I've been to. The first one was rather ambiguous, as I recall. Whose meeting is this?
It is the town council's meeting.
Okay, so they're responsible for what the agenda is, and they're
Correct.
responsible for providing any background materials, thoughts, ideas, recommendations that they might have that they'd like us to consider before we show up?
They have not.
No, I'm just saying, but they're, I mean, it's their meeting, they're responsible for doing that. Is that correct?
If they were inclined to provide you something, yes. I did, so in lieu of that, what we have re-provided to you if you didn't have it, and then let you know where it was if you did still have your book, is those sections of your 14 amendments book that will, that touches on the 3 topics that they have said they're interested in discussing. So we're just trying to re-remind you or give you the information again. But other than that, I don't have any other information for you. If there's something specific or...
And presumably they've seen that memo and they had an opportunity to review our thinking and our articulation of our thoughts on the matter?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
They had public hearings on it,
Yeah.
Mr. Callahan.
Coming into a meeting without them putting something in front of us, while we have already given something to them that best lays out our thinking at that point in time, seems to be a very interesting opportunity to have not much of a prepared conversation.
Well, this council does things differently, and it's their privilege. Maybe this offers a better opportunity for us to explore things, but it's different than what we're used to. We're used to getting something from the council, at least some sort of direction to say, hey guys, we're thinking about this. Are we off the ranch, or what we want, or if we did this, what happens? And they operate differently, so we just go with the flow. But it's their meeting, and I'm sure at the time they'll let us know. Steve?
Sure. I was just going to say, Tom, it's almost like they could have voted on all that information we gave them 2 months ago. We did how many meetings on this? We did like 8, 9 meetings, something like that?
I believe you did 6.
6? Okay.
really felt like
I'm a
8 or
natural
9.
exaggerator. My wife's listening right now like, I knew it.
Where were you those nights? All right, so everybody, August 6th, we'll be there. We're going in with a positive. It should be good. All right?
And if you do decide, or there's something else that you would like, shoot me an individual note, and I will send it out to everyone.
But I do want you to know that I did ask for all of that, or anything, and they felt that that's what the meeting was for, so, okay?
What time is that meeting?
That's a good question. I want to say, Dr. O'Neill, it's 5:30. I want to say it's 5:30 because I remember it being an off time, and I also...
You're going to email that information?
I'm going to email you that information.
And I'll get to it within the next few weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
We'll
Doc.
phone it into you, Dr. O'Neill.
All right. Urban Renewal Plan, ordinance update.
Okay, so you may or may not recall, about a year ago, the planning department applied for and received a grant, site ready, actually, we probably applied for it in 2023. And we went to town council and we got the approval to move ahead with this grant it was a site readiness grant, to integrate our urban renewal plan and all of the 11 amendments into the zoning ordinance. I'm not sure how familiar you folks are. We did talk about it at some point, I believe. But the urban renewal plan, which was written in November of 1969, which was a plan document and what you would typically want to think of. And then there were subsequently 11 amendments made over the last 40 years, or up until about 2009, actually after 2009, of that plan. And what we'd like to do is, so that sort of follow these linear text amendments, and it doesn't follow the same format as our zoning ordinance, although many of the regulations in there are zoning, or they're dimensional, they're ordinance regulations. So they might be setbacks or building height or landscaping or uses, types of uses and things like that. And it has been very difficult for staff and for the public to understand the flow of those 11 amendments, and because you don't just pick up the 11th amendment and it has all the changes. You actually have to sort of track it through. So we were able to hire a consultant who did exactly that. They literally took that plan, and then they redlined it, and then they accepted it, and then they redlined it, accepted it, and they gave us all 11 red lines so we could see how they tracked all the changes. And we'd like to bring it, well, we're certainly going to bring it to you. Internally, we talked with the consultant about, because there are some sticky points about moving things around, because it isn't a direct translation, unfortunately, and this is not, and the intent of this is not to change anything that's in that plan or those amendments. It's simply to just transfer it over to the ordinance. So let me back up to say in 2009, the plan was transferred by reference in section 7.1 of our ordinance, which just refers to it and all of the amendments that had occurred at the time. So we would like to transfer all those dimensional components and other components that would better fit in our ordinance format than in this text format. Because there are locations that don't transfer directly, I think it would be good for this board and for the town council to see those changes and then workshop it. I did have an opportunity, thankfully, to speak with the council president, and he'd like to do a joint workshop, or he suggested that maybe that's a more efficient and a better way for have everyone here at the same time, hearing the same thing from our consultant. So we're looking at possibly setting up a workshop time to go through the ordinance and the changes and everything I just mentioned. And Weston Sampson, who is our consultant, will certainly present all that to you. And then ultimately, the ultimate outcome out of this would be to have some direction given and which way to go with a couple of these turning points, and then have a draft ordinance provided through you and a recommendation to town council for incorporation. And again, it certainly helps out the staff. It was going to help out this board, because this board right now is the recommending body to the town council, which was also at one point the redevelopment agency. And when in 2009, when it moved back over, it inferred all of those redevelopment agency powers to the town council hat. So it would help both of those bodies and also the public to understand, anyone who's trying to do something over there. There are a lot of moving parts over there in the peer marketplace. So I just want to let you know that that's coming. Like I said, we'll figure out a good time, probably not until September or so at this moment. We have a lot of other meetings happening.
Okay. I was going to suggest a workshop with the town council, so I'm glad we're going to do that. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Steve? Tom? Rupert? Doc? Okay. Planning Board liaison updates, Coastal Access Improvement Committee. I have nothing to update. Land Conservancy Trust? Steve?
So I missed the last meeting because it was the day after my daughter was born, but we do have an update for
There is a statute of limitation on that card, you know.
2 days.
At least a couple of years, but
Yeah,
there
yeah.
is a statute.
So we are having our tree dedication to Matthew Callahan for all his good work. That's going to be Thursday at 5:30 at Sunset Farm. So if anybody wants to come, 5:30, there'll be no other business discussed. Just gonna, are we planting the tree then, or are we doing the plaque?
The tree is already planted. The
That's
plaque is
right.
already created. It's a dedication to Matthew Callahan. If you,
Can you send out a notification to all of us, just to remind us?
so you would need to RSVP
Okay.
to Terry Fleming, and I'll send that notice to the
Thank you.
board.
Great. All right. Anybody have any business? No?
Just a question for Jill. So on the call today with the planners, there was a lot of discussion about the e-permitting, and I just didn't know if there's any discussion about it happening here.
Yes. So the state, the legislation that most recently passed, because last year they passed and said you had to go to an electronic platform. Well, that could have been any kind of electronic platform. So this year they passed and said, oh no, wait. They corrected their error from last year, and they said it had to be the specific platform, which is OpenGov, which is the platform we already use. And it has to be done by October 2025. They are herding 39 cats right now because each cat has its own set of checklists, and they're trying to incorporate those. One of the concerns, Mr. Friday, that I heard today was that the checklists are unique to each town, and they're specific and unique to each town, and it's very difficult to go from a unique and specific situation to a standardized online permitting application. Concern for us is, a couple-fold. One, if we're incorporating the checklist into the application, does that mean when you can hit send on the application, the checklist is approved? That's confusing. And also whether or not, when the time clock starts ticking. That's also a concern for us, because as you know, the law changed a couple of years ago, which shortened the time clock and made it calendar days, which is disconcerting. If it could be submitted, for instance, on a Friday at 5 of a Monday holiday week. So you've just lost potentially 4 days of a 15-day review. So I do have an email into the commissioner's office. So this is all sort of coming out of the commissioner's office, building commissioner. I haven't heard back on that time clock question yet. And/or how we change our checklist. I have a question on that too. Like, what if we want to change it? Right now, your checklist is incorporated into your subdivision regulations. This go around, I would like to pull it out regardless, because I don't think you should have it, in case we want to make any edits or changes to the checklist, it shouldn't have to go through the full public hearing process. It could just come to you. So we were going to pull it out anyway, but if we don't, it's a public hearing process every time we want to change e-permitting. Or, there's a lot of moving parts. Did I answer your question, or just bring more questions?
By October.
By October.
Fine. Okay. Staff, you have anything more to add?
No. Thank you.
Okay. Board, anything more to add? Sir, as you stuck this out, you want to add anything to this? Okay. Do I have a motion?
Yes, motion to adjourn.
Seconded?